Hello, I'm Karina.
And I'm Maddie.
And welcome to Everything But the Fairy Tale Sink.
Yes.
You might notice my background has changed. That's because the dude is still mowing.
Yes. And I mentioned this at the end of our last video, but I'll make it brief here because this is going to be a big boy episode. We are mass pre-recording right now because both Karina and I will be moving and going home for the summer and doing all sorts of things. So we figured we'd rather not try and film on our crappy home internet and we'd just be better off here. Anyways, wishes before we get... Oh, actually, what's this episode? What's this episode?
Well, this episode is Casket Girls New Orleans, which I'm very excited about. Wishes come at the end, Madison. We're doing...
Yeah, I know.
My recommendation is the song Uh-Oh by Jeremy Shada.
That's such a good song. I literally was listening to it last night as I was getting ready for bed and everything, and I was like, yeah, this song is a bop.
It is. It's so good.
Anyways, I guess you know what I'll do?
What?
My recommendation is the song Ballerina by Jeremy Shada. Also a good song. Good. Not as much of a banger, but it's like a very cute romantic song, and I like it.
I love it. His music's just really good. So
now I have Uh-Oh stuck in my head, so...
Oof. I have...
Uh-oh. Let's begin.
A disclaimer before we begin. This episode contains a lot of stuff. Contains vague descriptions of sexual assault, abuse against women and children, colonial violence, and mistreatment of the mentally ill. If these things are triggers for you, please skip this week's episode. So, for those of you who don't know, the city of New Orleans is just one of those topics that doesn't leave my brain. I am so in love with it. It is a cultural anomaly, as it's almost preserved in time as this old European town, but it has heavy influences from all across the world. And then above ground graves, which are, very unique to New Orleans, make a city of their own. And while the residents of the cemeteries are dead, they are not known to be quiet. And neither are the living residents nor the tourists. Bourbon Street is one of the biggest party destinations in the world.
New Orleans just isn't quiet. New Orleans just is always loud.
It is a loud city. Even non-believers report feeling otherworldly influences amidst the jazz music and stunning scenery. If this podcast was called Things About New Orleans that Karina could talk about for hours, we would be here for hours. But I had to pick just one story for the time being. So we're calling back to our first two-parter, and we're talking about vampires. After all, like I said, the dead are loud in New Orleans. According to a 2017 study, at least 50 so-called real vampires walk the street of New Orleans. In fact, the New Orleans Vampire Association is made for people who allegedly have a medical need to drink human or animal blood. And if you ask anyone who spent time in the city, mostly the locals, they'll tell you 50 is a gross understatement. At the address 1100 Chartres Street, there's the Ursuline Convent. According to legend, the convent attic is home to the Casket Girls. These girls came to New Orleans on a ship to be bride for settlers, and arrived so sickly and pale, their skin would blister in the sunlight. They carried large coffin-shaped boxes that contained their belongings and went to the convent to live. Later, the nuns found these boxes empty. To their horror, they realized the girls had been traveling with vampires and they'd accidentally given shelter to the undead. That night, the nuns blessed the convent and sealed the windows with nails blessed by the Pope himself. They hoped this would keep the vampires out so the sun could do its work. However, some seem to have remained. To this day, locals won't walk by the convent between midnight and 6 a.m, afraid of what lurks there still. The windows are always shuttered and locked, even on the hottest summer days. You are allowed to explore the first 2 floors of the convent with a guide, but no one is allowed in the attic. How do you feel so far?
I know I can't go there, but I want to go there.
You can't. I'm sorry.
I know.
I do have a description of what's in the attic, though. So
yay!
I would like to say, I don't know if I wrote this in here, the official statement released by the person in charge of the convent is that it's storage space. So there's 2 really popular legends told by ghost tour guides in New Orleans. The first was during Hurricane Katrina, and that is one of the shutters was blown open, exposing the darkness within. While the city itself was still being evacuated, the Vatican flew in new blessed nails to make sure the windows were latched as quickly as possible. This story definitely didn't happen, but it is fun.
There is a hurricane, and that is your priority?
There is no evidence of this actually happening.
Okay.
However, the second one, from everything I can find, is actually true, and honestly a lot scarier.
Okay.
In the 1970s, 2 ghost hunters hid in the courtyard of the convent as they'd spotted a slightly open shutter earlier in the day. Nobody knows what happened that night, but the next day, their mangled bodies were found in front of the convent, drained entirely of blood. So no, Madison, you cannot go in the middle of the night.
I want to, and part of me will always want to, but I know better than to because I know to respect the space. I'm not an idiot. I mean, okay, jury's out on that, but I'm a smart idiot.
I'm dumb, but I'm not stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so now we get to go into history. So let's talk about Jean-Baptiste Lémon de Bienville.
French.
Yep. He grew up in New France, which is now the Quebec area of Canada, and went on an expedition to find a new French colony. The first capital of this colony, the Louisiana colony, was a town called Mobile, which today is in the state of Alabama. But Bienville wasn't satisfied, and in 1717 he wrote to the French crown about this area on the Mississippi River. He thought it was an ideal location to set up the capital, as it was geographically well protected, and it was between 2 massive trading ports, and it was an ideal place to set up a military presence to control the river. He called this place La Nouvelle Orléans, or New Orleans. Now, we're honest about American history here. There was already a lot of people in this area. In fact,
what? No way! No way there was already people somewhere.
Salty Karina time. The colonizers didn't care about the destruction they caused, and within 2 years, the town was built enough to support the colonizer occupation. And in 1721, the famous French Quarter was designed. Now, I will say, French Quarter is a bucket list place for me. English is sometimes hard. Now, the original population of New Orleans was rough around the edges. There were the tradesmen, which were the fur trappers, the miners, and the soldiers, but a big population of the new settlement was French prisoners that had just been dumped there. This was really common at the time. They would literally just dump their prisoners in the New World so they wouldn't have to deal with them. Jesuit Pierre F.X. de Charlevoix described it as a place of 100 wretched hovels. And
what a lovely place to live. Where do you live? The place of 100 wretched hovels.
Right? And the area was extremely prone to flooding and disease. And these men had, I feel disgusting saying it, needs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Bienville was very bothered by the fact that these men were chasing after native women. Not because the women were being assaulted, but because they weren't good Christian women. And this was also pissing off the tribes, understandably. So Bienville realized that violence wouldn't be good either. I know, it's mind-boggling. So he wrote to the king for women as he knew about there was a success in New France. My roommate is making lunch, so sorry about that. The first attempt was with women from prisons, which did not go well. However, I know, shocking.
The more you talk, the more I just...
Oh, it gets worse.
Oh, good.
However, the second was a smashing success in the eyes of the men. I'm going to address this now because most of these women were children who had to be convinced, or that were convinced that they were going to a better life than the orphanage and streets they knew.
Cue the noise that Loki makes after he gets thrown around by Hulk, just the long, pained noise. That's me.
Yeah, but back to the history. There'd been nearly 760 women on the second voyage to New France between the ages of 12 and 25. They had been sent with a letter of recommendation from their home parish and with paid passage by the king. If it makes you feel a little bit better, most of these girls actually went to school for a little bit before they got married off. So they were like 14 instead of 12. Doesn't make me feel much better.
Wow, that makes me feel so much better. Thank you.
So next were the Pelican girls in Mobile, who were between 14 and 17, and they actually rebelled against the terrible conditions. However, some of them later...
No way.
I know, I'm shocked. I didn't find anything else about it. I just found out that they rebelled. However, some of them later became citizens of New Orleans, so I guess Bienville thought this was a success story. This guy might be worse than Josh. Actually, no, he's definitely worse than Joshua. So Bienville had tried another method before writing to the king. He employed this man, or monster in my opinion, named John Law. This awful piece of filth.
Wait, his name was Law?
John Law.
Law. L-A-W. Law.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah. This awful piece of human garbage tried to solve the woman shortage by kidnapping orphans, beggars, and sex workers who he knew had nobody to protect or miss them. Most of them didn't go willingly, and the ones who volunteered only did so because he promised them a simple but happy life with full bellies and warm beds.
It's the J names for this podcast that just aren't it.
Yeah, no, there's always the memes about J names are bad. We're proving it. No offense to anybody with a J name. There are very beautiful and very lovely people with J names. But yeah, so this was a bold-faced lie. And the poor girls were given to men who lived in cramped huts without furniture, with no way to combat the summer heat. And their husbands often abused them and then left them for months on end.
Shocker! I'm so shocked and surprised.
Many of these girls were already sick from the voyage, so many tragically ended up dying. And since literal kidnapping didn't work, shocker I know, Bienville asked the king for good women to straighten the men out. He was concerned as his men were too busy having so-called affairs with native women. The women are clearly the issue here.
Always. Yeah, clearly they're the problem. Always. It's always the women's fault. It's women's.
Yeah, I promise that this episode gets more fun, but we did have to talk about this. So, according to the legend, the king answered the call. However, this was in 1721, and the king died in 1715. So it was the Parisian government that actually sent the girls. I don't know why there's that disparity, but there is.
Yeah, why not?
The best part about this new batch of girls that were sent,
and
there was literally an edict that said they couldn't dump prisoners in the colonies anymore. So instead, they went to a bunch of girls who were between the ages of 12 and 30 and housed at a workhouse. Technically not a prison, but this place was awful.
Technically.
Yeah, they were like, yeah, of course I'm going to go to this place. So much better than this. And it was within this group of women that the Casket girls were found. So when these girls arrived, mortality rates went like, and whispers of them being vampires spread like wildfire. They were
not they're sick, not they're just not doing well, just
no
vampires. The obvious first choice.
Legend. They were, after all, sickly, pale, and some of them were even coughing up blood. However,
disease?
Skeptics have found holes in this story. We do have to address them. So first of all, and this actually made me a little mad when I read it because it definitely takes the magic out of this a little bit. Casket girls comes from a mistranslation of the French word cassette, which is a type of small chest.
Small chest girls. They carry chests. Duh.
Yeah, also it's not surprising that the girls were sickly and coughing up blood, as diseases like tuberculosis.
I was going to say tuberculosis. Has anybody heard of that?
Festered while the girls, they were forced to stay below deck away from the sun because they didn't want their skin being damaged. You would think this would discredit it, but I honestly think it kind of helps the story. But the story of the Casket girls is heavily reliant on their home being the Ursuline convent. But the nuns didn't even have a permanent residence in New Orleans until nearly 15 years after the girls arrived. And that wasn't even the convent they're in now. That one was built in 1745. But that actually doesn't rule out the Casket girls being vampires, in my opinion. So the sisters, when they got there, had a temporary, and I found the year that they got there was about 1726.
Okay.
And I've also read the girls got there in 1728, so the years are a little bit muddled, but sometime in the 1720s. So they had a temporary residence in the French Quarter. An important thing to note about these nuns, they were there to help the sick and destitute. They were so averse to attention that they literally would go in covered carriages so nobody could see them. So they did not want to be seen.
They really just are leaning into the whole vampire thing.
Okay, when they moved to their new convent, they threw a parade. The official story from the nuns was that they were making a statement to the lawless public that God was now in town and they needed to straighten themselves up. However, eyewitnesses observed dozens of long, coffin-esque boxes being wheeled behind the nuns, covered up and hidden so nobody could see what they actually looked like, which is weird.
Why would that be included in a parade?
You know, like literally, this parade was complete with children dressed up as angels, and they had them around the coffins, or the boxes, so nobody could see the boxes. So I'm like, to me, that's way more sketch than the girls being sick.
Tuberculosis? Nah. Vampires? Yes.
Any other explanation as to why they would have giant coffins?
No. You don't move your dead with you when you move to a new convent. Convents don't house dead people.
All right, and we do actually have a modern day account of the attic. This is what I was sending you pictures of, and it really doesn't match up with the storage unit story the convent has released.
Well, obviously they're going to want to try and cover it up.
So we're talking about a lady named LiQWYD Crandall. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. She's an author who was actually allowed into the attic along with a guide. I highly recommend reading her article, which will be posted below. She is an incredible writer, and it's fascinating, and she provides pictures. I'm sending this to you after we record.
Okay.
So she describes the attic as being long and dark. Light peeking through the shutters, quote, like laser beams, was the only source of light. The doors were open, which she thought was really weird because there was nobody up there. And it was quiet, besides there was a storm outside. And there were 7 rooms beside.
I don't think I'd want to visit this attic
No.
during a storm.
No.
I don't want to go anywhere during storms. I just don't like storms.
Yeah. So there were 7 rooms up in the attic. 6 of them, according to the guide, were former bedchambers for orphans. They now have multiple sections of the floor missing, which happens to be the perfect size for a coffin. That's what I sent you the picture of just the like holes in the ground.
Yeah, that is the one where I said there's this old story that witches can't go up uneven stairs.
Yes, but why?
But it's an attic floor, and these aren't witches we're talking about, so I don't know. It could just be superstition, or they could have just been housing coffins and just covered it up. Who knows?
It's weird.
We'll never know, probably.
Probably not. So the 7th room is darker and smaller with brick floors and huge chains hanging from the beams in the back of the room.
That's not sketchy at all.
It has a Dutch door, so food could be shoved in without the nuns going inside the room for the nuns' safety. So the guide told Marita that those declared insane were kept in that room, as the brick floors made it easy to wash away bodily fluid and the chains kept them restrained. So either this place was a torture chamber for the mentally ill, or it was a place where they kept vampires, and honestly, I prefer the vampires.
If it was the former, that's probably why the nuns were so secretive and didn't want anyone seeing them, is because nuns are supposed to do godly things for God and not whatever this garbage is.
I will say in defense of the nuns, they didn't know better at the time. This was at a time when mental health was
that's true.
Like misunderstood.
Yeah,
however, it is really hard to think about.
Yeah, I'll take vampires.
Yeah, no, I'm like, I'd prefer the vampires by this point.
They kept vampires there. Boom, we solved it.
That's the legend. So according to the guide, Hurricane Katrina, left the attic damaged, even though Marita didn't see any proof of that. And they were also in the attic. And they hadn't yet obtained the funds needed for repairs. That doesn't really explain why everything was left completely empty, though, when it's
an attic
storage space.
Not attics. Hurricanes don't pick and choose what they wreck.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like they just plucked up pieces of flooring and were like, look, I left you coffin-sized holes. It's like, no, it would be just gone.
Yeah. And it doesn't explain. Oh, and also she said the holes were perfectly rectangular. That's not Hurricane.
No.
Also explain why the shutters are sealed so tightly, like to the point where you cannot move them, when it could help keep the convent cool to open them, especially in Louisiana.
Yeah, I was going to say, Louisiana's hot.
That room. And I'm sorry, Hurricane does not explain why there are still chains in that room.
A hurricane also would have ripped the shutters clean off.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Marita is under the impression that the attic's contents had been temporarily removed to satisfy her curiosity and to mask an unpleasant truth. Honestly, I don't entirely not believe her.
We're covering up scary things to make us look better? What?
Okay, but it confuses me as to they really shot themselves in the foot there because they're like, this is just a storage space.
And then they're like,
show you this completely empty attic.
We're going to show you this completely empty attic that also has chains left in it. So,
yeah. It's weird. So that's unfortunately where we have to end the speculating. But there's a couple things we can say for certain. One, vampire lore is a massive part of New Orleans culture. I mean, for example, I know you don't like the movie, but Interview with a Vampire and all of that series was written by a New Orleans native. The books are supposed to be better than the movie, and I will.
There's also a Netflix show out there called Dark Tourist, and he visits vampires, and I'm pretty sure it's in the New Orleans area.
Mm-hmm. Well, like also another thing,
which is a great show.
There's modern day vampire shows based in New Orleans. The Originals, for example, which I love, even though it's kind of a guilty pleasure, but also not really. But yeah, and second, and this might be a controversial claim, but well, this part isn't. The women who came on the ships are considered to be the mothers of New Orleans, and many residents of the city are very proud to trace their lineage back to the girls. And this is the controversial part. Between them and the nuns who provided for the sick and needy, it could be argued that New Orleans was really born on the blood, sweat, and tears of the women. And if some of them broke from abuse and terrible conditions and became vampires, I would not blame them for a second. And that is where we're ending today's episode. What do you think, Madison?
You said this episode would make me mad, and I'm just confused.
Oof. Okay, John Law makes me mad.
John and Joshua, get out.
Yeah.
Snitches end up in ditches, John. Although he's not a snitch, he'll just end up in a ditch, though.
I will say, it makes me very mad thinking about what those women and what if the story the guide told Marita is true, what the mentally ill had to go through at the time. However, if I believe any of the legends we've told, I believe this one.
Yeah, there's so much stuff that you and me will never ever find out, especially when it's got such dark, controversial things surrounding it. They're never going to let the true story hit the light unless it makes them look good.
Which it really doesn't.
But if the truth came out that it was, vampires, and people would be like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. But if it comes out,
it also makes the Ursuline nuns look pretty cool if they've been protecting the public from vampires for like 300 years.
Well, who knows?
400 years. But yeah, so I will say, and this is an opinion I know a lot of people hold as well, if vampires are real and they only exist in New Orleans, I would believe that.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about that.
I want to go to New Orleans so bad.
Uh-huh.
So bad. But yeah, so that is the end of the episode today. What's coming up next week?
I'm finding it right now. Pretty sure I did some. Okay, so up next, we're going back to the land of Greek mythology, and we will be covering the myth of Apollo and Hyacinth.
Oh boy.
Yeah. I would like to thank my friend Riley for bringing this one to my attention again, because honestly, I kind of forgot about it, and then I looked into it like, this is just a mess.
There is a chance we might have a guest next week. I don't know what her plan is, but we might. And yes. Wishes?
Yes, wishes. My wish is that... Oh, I've already done that one, dang it.
Okay, I just thought of one. Do you want me to go first?
Yes.
My wish is that if you're taking notes, and you have mostly a cat, but any animal, that your animal doesn't decide to just chirp your hand.
My wish is that if you work and have a job and it's almost time for you to get off work, you don't immediately get flooded with customers that keep you from getting off work.
Thank you so much for watching today. Follow us on here. Follow us on TikTok. That'll be up eventually.
Shoot, I forgot to mention my incentive. So my incentive is that if we get 50 followers on Instagram and 50 followers on YouTube, 50 subscribers on YouTube, I will get a giant life-size cardboard cutout of Loki, and it will live in the background of my videos. I think I'm hilarious.
Okay, we'll up the stakes next time. I will get to do something. Maybe if we get to 100 by August, I'll get the giant Edward Cullen cutout.
No! Mine is at least someone I tolerate and like.
I had to raise the stakes a little bit.
It's incentive.
Anyways, yeah, follow us on TikTok, the website should be up by the end of the summer. Oh yeah, I don't know if I mentioned Instagram, but follow us on Instagram.
I just threw us way
we
off
hope
track
you
for the
had
outro.
fun this week, because this episode is one that I've been really wanting to do for a while.
Yes, I enjoyed it,
We'll see you
and I
next
have a
week.
lot of feelings.
I also have a lot of feelings.
Do you even go here? Anyways,
Bye.
bye.
Bye.